Greetings, everyone, and very good afternoon to you, and a very warm welcome, heartfelt welcome to another Embracing Oneness half-day retreat. Today's theme is entitled Reconciliation and Forgiveness, the Call of Time. It was just magical putting this program together with such sought after individuals who are in demand. I will first introduce Sister Jayanti. Sister Jayanti is the additional chief of the Brahma Kumaris with over 40 years of practical experience of Raj Yoga meditation. And you will notice when she begins to talk that Sister Jayanti has a gentle voice and profound insights on spiritual solutions to everyday problems. And as such, she has touched the lives of thousands of people across the world. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Marie Wilson. Dr. Wilson was a commissioner with Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was set up to record the previously hidden history of more than a century of forced residential schooling of Indigenous children. Dr. Wilson has spoken around the world on the potential of reconciliation, and recently she has brought her skills as a journalist and her heart as a grandmother to her published memoir, North of Nowhere. So that's a book that we can actually look for to read. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Eric Lerest, who spent over 35 years as a journalist and producer with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Currently, Eric is the national coordinator of the Brahma Kumaris Meditation Centers in Canada.
Well, loving greetings to each and every one. And I have to acknowledge being with two women that I consider probably the most influential women in my life, two women that I love dearly for about 40 years each. I think I've known each other, each one of you, just a few years apart. I knew Sister Jayanti right at my beginning when I was just a little 20-some years old, young boy trying to figure out the world. And I saw a lighthouse in London and she was there. And when I was at the early days of my career as a journalist, I was very impressed to interview Mary Wilson in Yellowknife. And I knew during the interview that it was not an interview, but it was an amazing meeting of hearts. And we've been friends since that time. Throughout my career, Mary has always been a light shining, to keep me thinking in a new way, in a positive way. In the world of CBC, she was head of CBC. The invisible part of CBC some people don't know about. It's not just French and English in Canada, but it's called CBC North. And it's the part of the public television dedicated to all the First Nations. Mary was head of that branch of CBC, and just not a head, but she was the heart. And throughout all my life, I think Sister Jayanti and I was almost going to say Sister Mary, but Mary, who was like my sister, have been guiding me. So when I listened to the introduction, I have to say that it would take more than an hour just to introduce both of you properly. I'm glad that you're introduced today as a chief, Sister Jayanti, because we want to honor the First Nation. So I think a chief is very welcome here in this gathering. But Sister Jayanti is so much more, and I don't know how we can convey sometime the greatness of someone. It could be experienced by meeting, and sharing words are very limited. But I can guarantee you that there are giants on earth, and they're not physical giants, but spiritual giants, and Sister Jayanti is definitely one of them. And for Mary also, just a commissioner or head of CBC North will be so limiting in terms of describing the greatness of a heart in Canada. And I'm not the only one to really believe in Canada that she's one of our most precious gem and pearl and diamond from the rocks of the north. And she's really a beautiful woman that I hope everyone has a chance to meet one day. And I can't be more happy to have both you, Sister Janti, and Mary to come together. I've been dreaming for that day for a long, long, long time. Mary met Sister Mohini in Vancouver when we had a Images and Voices of Hope event decades ago. Mary had the chance to come to Peace Village, our retreat center in USA, and she was invited there to finish her book, North of Nowhere. So she went south to finish the book, North of Nowhere, and she spent a few weeks in Peace Village, waking up early in the morning, embracing our lifestyle as yogis. And that gave the final touch to the book, which is a must read in Canada, I would say. To both of you, I wanted to offer you this very special little bouquet that I prepared for you, and it's called Lily of the Valley. So both of you, and these are very, very special flowers. They bloom for only 1 week in a year, in May. And in France, we always offer them in May 1st. If Zoom could add the smelling device, please Zoom, send us the smell because this is the most fragrant flower you'll ever smell in your life. So to both of you, Mary and Sister Genti, please enjoy the fragrance. And finally, and I'm sorry for this long introduction, I wanted to honor also this conversation with a very, very special gesture here in order to honor all the First Nations in Canada. I received a few months ago a very, very special gift that really moved me, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I told the one who gave it to me that I will keep it, and I will keep it in a very beautiful space until one day I know it will be the right day to use it. It's a very special gift I received, wrapped exactly like that. Mary will immediately know what it is. And when I opened it, it was designed and made specially for the purpose of being offered to me. So it's a very personalized. So it's called the talking stick, which you will be familiar with. I've never used it. I said I will only unwrap it the day I know there's a sacred moment that is worth using it. And so I think today is a perfect day. Although Zoom don't have the doesn't have the capacity to send it to you through Zoom, I think I would like to put it here with me and with all of you. And I think it will also give a chance to all the members of the First Nation to be with us, either with a silent voice but an open heart, or a present voice that will be expressed through the three of us. So this was my long introduction to welcome all of you. Also, just to remind everyone that there is translation, of course, en français. Canada has this beautiful, we wish we can offer how many official First Nation language we have in Canada. Maybe one day we will do that. But today will be also in French. So French speaking guests, you can join the translation. All right. So with that embrace to all of you, welcome, Mary, Sister Genty. And yes, watching the video triggered again a whole, strong moment. I've been covering this Truth and Reconciliation Commission for years. I think I was the one, I can be proud of it. I was the one probably at CBC who has been pushing the most for the public television in Canada to cover this event thoroughly from the beginning to the end. It was over 6 years, almost 7 years, I think, that this commission took place. Mary has been listening to thousands of testimonies like the one we heard. I don't know how she did it. After one or two, I break into tears. I leave the room and I go for a walk, and it takes me a week to recover. How you did it, Mary, to listen to these testimonies with your smile that you have. I've seen you writing by hand your notes, refusing to be on a computer like a kind of official government representative. You embraced everyone. There was the idea that every tears in the commission will be collected on special tissues that will be collected by the end of the event, and they will be honored. So many tears. So, Mary, tell us a little bit and I know we're maybe over 100 now, but there will be thousands listening in the next few weeks, few months. Just to give us a context a little bit for those who are not from Canada, even though we saw that little video, if you can just give us a context a little bit, and I know you could take hours to describe it, but how would you contextualize this page of history in Canada in the eyes of the world?
The reason I had myself unmuted, I'm carrying a bad cough. I'm sorry, and if I mute and turn away, but I want to reassure you, I had been sick, I have been treated, I'm fine, but I still have a cough, so I'll hide my cough as best I can. And Eric, I am going to answer your question, but if you just would allow me to just say a couple of other things first. And first of all, Sister Jantia, I'm so happy to be in this conversation with you. I do feel as though I have known you for years because Eric talks about you so often, and this is wonderful to be here. I want to thank you, Eric, for the gift of flowers because my birthday is in May, and I have known all along that lily of the valley is the flower of May, and it has a beautiful scent. And where I live in northern Canada, it does not grow. And it's one of the things I miss about being in southern Ontario, where I was born and raised. I want to also say a special thank you to Nina Buchanan for your kind words of introduction, and it's just great to be in this international forum with all of you. And just to tell you, to situate you where I am, because this is what we try to take care to do. I am in Mi'kma'ki, which is part of the Mi'kmaq extended homeland of the Atlantic region of Eastern Canada. And I am dining, by the way, on Fisherman's Friend lozenges. It seems only appropriate. But I am from southwestern Ontario, which for those who know Canada is it's the most southerly part of the country. And where I now live is in one of the most northerly regions in the Northwest. So it's a big breadth of placements. And I know that the commission that we're going to be talking about was everywhere in Canada because residential schools were everywhere in Canada. The final thing that I wanted to say is just I really want to appreciate the beautiful opening video. And I know you're talking about Chief Robert Joseph, and I've known him since the beginning. He was one of the key architects of our Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I'll come back to that. And obviously, I know that story very well. But what I was really touched by was the beautiful opening video montage of the eagle. And it's a very particular symbol for me because I've been taken in many Indigenous ceremonies, and that particular one, I have been told, is my protector spirit animal, and it is also the symbol of love. And I think that is so pertinent to a discussion of forgiveness because it is at the heart of our ability to forgive both others and ourselves. But what I was struck by, because the videography was so strong in that opening montage, is just that reminder, given the times we are in, that that is what the eagle does. It goes down into the depths in order to be able to soar the highest heights. And it does that over and over again and recognizes the connection between those two. So I just experienced it as an incredible encouragement and reminder of the way the world is integrated in that way. And we see those lessons all around us. Our commission now, and you did ask me to be brief, so you can see you can't count on me. I just want to say this because for international participants, very often people get excited about what we did in Canada and they say, well, we want to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission too. And I think it's very important to understand that Canada had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission because of a massive court case. And because if you think in biblical terms, David and Goliath, the Davids being 80,000 living residential school survivors who, of course, were now adults, but who had basically lived out their childhoods in those schools. They took on the two most powerful institutions in our country, being the government of Canada, and at that time, the four national churches, both Protestant and Catholic, all Christian churches, who were running the schools on contract to the federal government. And that was that massive court case that led to an out-of-court settlement just for expediency and time because the plaintiffs were elderly. And so it was an out-of-court settlement. And the heart of the settlement agreement, according to survivors, was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission because they wanted to have a forum where they could come and put their side of the story, if you will, to put their experiences on the record in an out-of-court way so that there would be recorded history of what happened to them and so that we could learn, so that we could honor that, the teachings that are embedded in all of that, and so that we could safeguard it for future reference, future generations, and so that we could never deny that this happened in Canada. So my role as one of three commissioners was to guide that truth and reconciliation process. And we went across the country. We were in place, as it turned out, for 6.5 years. And at the end, after hearing from almost 7,000 of those, so approaching 9% of the living survivors, which is a very high sampling, as you all know, we used what we heard and what we researched, as well as all the written records from the government and the churches, to design our 10 principles of reconciliation, as well as what were referred to and still are as 94 calls to action. And that is the ongoing work that is there. And that is what all sectors of society, they were not all directed at government, they were directed across all sectors of society. And I think that has been a big help in them taking hold. I'll just maybe leave it at that for now, Eddie. Thank you.
Well, I'll give you time to rest your throat now for a minute and turn to, of course, I've seen your work during all these years, and we'll come back to it, but the heart of now talking about reconciliation and forgiveness, after listening to so many testimonies of horror, I'm really looking forward to your, light on this. Sister Jayanti, I know you're in Africa at the moment, and you've been traveling the world extensively. And your spiritual heart, your spiritual eyes, your spiritual mind have seen also the beauty, but also the horror of the world in many, many different dimensions: individual, social, collective, religious, organized crime. You've been at the heart of many, many forums throughout the many decades. They said more than 40 years. It's more than 60 years, I think you were born almost as a spiritual flower in the world, and we are so grateful for that. And just wondering how you would contextualize your experience of the horrors that we've seen in the world in bringing us to a conversation about reconciliation. So where do you see yourself almost as a commissioner in a way of witnessing, a world scope of crimes committed leading to this idea that there should be a reconciliation and forgiveness? And I know you may want to say hello first to all of us, and I can give you more flowers.
Yes, I'd like to say hello to Marie, and I hope that apart from Zoom, perhaps we'll welcome you to Mount Abu, where we can have the meeting personally. And what you shared was very much from the heart. And I can just imagine the things that you were experiencing through that period of 6+ years. And Eric, yes, I've known you since you were a young boy.
Mhm.
And it's been a lovely friendship through the years. And I know that in India, we see time in a cyclical way, which is perhaps what many indigenous people also see, because nature doesn't move in straight lines. Everything is part of a smaller or a bigger cycle. And in that context, we would say that the period we're passing through now is a period of total darkness. It's been described in the scriptures as the time of unrighteousness, irreligiousness, massive death, and trauma. All these things have been mentioned in the scriptures, but the hope at the end of the darkness is that after the night comes the day. And so I see we're in a very, very important transition period. We're moving from the dark night to the sunshine of the day. And I feel that the dawn has broken. Dawn has already come. And this is why there are such things as truth and reconciliation commissions happening at this particular time in history. If I look at the story of India, it's a tragic one under colonial rule. I won't go into the details of that because it is a real, real tragedy with famines that weren't natural famines, but were imposed on the local population. I look around the world today, I see what happened in Australia and still to a certain extent continues. New Zealand, Africa, South America. Just look across the world and you'll see that it's that state of darkness that has existed, not just for 100 years, but maybe 1,000 years, maybe a bit more than that. And so given the fact that we are coming out of that period of darkness, but this is the end of the dark night, and we're moving into the future, one of great light. But the light begins in here. And so at the moment when I'm ready to see the light, and I absorb that light within my own inner being, my own inner world, my vision for the world changes. And where perhaps there wouldn't have been compassion and love, today there is that. And not just for one particular part of the world, but generally the entire globe. And it's also not even just for human life and consciousness, but we see what human beings generally have done to nature, to the animal kingdom. Biodiversity is a big subject that people are just beginning to be aware of. But biodiversity and the loss of that has been happening for 100 years, maybe even longer, but certainly intensified in the last 100 years or so. But it's only today that we're becoming aware of that. So to me, it was a very, very moving story. It had me in tears, and I was glad I didn't have to speak immediately after the story. But I know that it's one story out of the story of the globe. And it's time now to let go, to forgive, learn the lessons from the past, but also allow our own highest potential as a human species to emerge. I think that we're ready for this. I've been traveling a lot, as you know, but here in Africa, last year, I attended a dialogue for the Call of the Time the year before in South Africa. And last year it was in Mauritius. This year it was targeting West Africa, because travel from north to south, from east to west is horrendous in Africa, even today. It takes hours and hours from one to the other place. More hours than it took me to travel from London to Accra. So there's still huge gaps of communication and transportation here on this continent. But I'm mentioning this because it was beautiful to witness how people were ready to understand things from not just the human dimension, but from a spiritual perspective. And so I think that the light is shining. We are beginning to understand that there are many different perspectives that we can look at. And the highest of all qualities definitely is love. But connected with that, there's another quality that's associated with the divine. They say that love is God, God is love, but they also say that about truth. Truth is God, God is truth. So these two qualities coming together are part of the awakening of humanity at the present moment. We're seeing people who would never have been interested in spirituality 10 years ago now be very, very open and ready to acknowledge this in public. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Iceland, and the current president of Iceland spoke on a public platform with about 400 people. And she stated she's been an entrepreneur, she's been in wears many different hats, but is very, very concerned about truth and love and the role of women in making that happen. So what she said in one sentence summarizes it. We've created all the situations outside, but now we can't find solutions to those things outside. It is only by going in that we can change things out there. I would not have expected the president of a country to be talking about this in this language even 5 years ago. No, mind, 10, 20 years ago, but not even 5 years ago, maybe. And the former Prime Minister of Iceland was in another session with us, and she spoke very, very openly about the need for people to come back to truth, and politicians in particular need to understand that. Just to give you a tiny glimpse of how things are changing, and the fact that this process happened is beautiful, so that history is known to people and understood by people. I was in a program once, which was in Geneva. This was in the 80s. And the program was talking about, at the UN in Geneva, and the program was talking about how to have reconciliation. They didn't use that word, togetherness or recognition of different parts of belief. They didn't want to use the word religion because Russia and China were participating and it was a different world at that time. But Canada and the USA talked about no discrimination in their countries. The governments, there were NGOs present in the gathering, and they spoke up and said, well, that's not true. You haven't heard our story. I can tell you precisely, it was 1984. And it was actually, the subject was about discrimination in terms of matters of belief. And so they had a voice to share, but it was very difficult for them to actually speak about it in detail. But can you believe it? Even in the 80s, there was total denial that there had ever been any discrimination. And so now that we've come to the point where it is recognized and understood to a certain extent, I think it's the beginning of a new chapter.
I want to move into something very personal, but before, maybe Mary, you wanted to add some thoughts. I know you're thinking and you're always, and I want to create a dialogue between both of you. So feel free, Mary, if you have something you want to share now. Otherwise, I'll move into.
As you were speaking, Sister Janti, it was so, I just found myself listening to the elders who spoke to our commission. And one of the things that we did in our work was to convene a special session, a gathering that was specifically with traditional knowledge keepers from various distinct nations throughout the country. And some of the very messages that you've just offered they said, and because I think that is the heart of it, is for us to realize we live in this moment of time, but we have ancient teachings to call upon. And I so agree with you that things are not linear. They are circular, as are all things in nature around us, our teachers. And I don't know if it's appropriate, Eric, but I thought I would just read a couple of little things from the book that were the words of the knowledge keepers and what they said about these issues of love and forgiveness and reconciliation. And the first I'll say is being in a ceremony, just this one sentence or two sentences from the person who was an indigenous spiritual leader who welcomed everyone into the ceremony and said this: "Lucky for us, God speaks many languages. Lucky for us, there is no wrong way to pray." And so that just kind of summed it up in total. But we convened a discussion with these traditional knowledge keepers, particularly to ask about the theme of reconciliation. And what does it mean? Because everyone kept wanting us to basically give a definition so they'd know what to do. And of course, no one answered it in that way because it isn't a definition. It's a deep understanding, it's a continuing spiritual practice, and it's a way of life and a way of seeing ourselves and each other. And so I'll just read these couple of little things here, just excerpts. We have to be the catalysts of change. Let us start our healing. Our way of life is a spiritual way of life. In reconciliation, I am more interested in teaching my grandchildren how to love each other and how to love the land. We need kindness, that universal value. We need to embrace and take care of the human family. Be fearless and always stand up for the children. Forgiveness has a lot to do with how we understand reconciliation. Your responsibility is to free yourself. Allow yourself to be the person you are meant to be. That's what reconciling is, putting things back together in a good way, in balance, back to the center again. Reconciliation is not an indigenous or a political issue. Reconciliation is non-racial, non-partisan, and it includes reconciliation with the earth. They also drew links between identity, spiritual values, and education. When our children go to school, they should graduate with love, respect, and kindness. So I think very much words in the spirit of what you have offered us, Sister Janti, as well. And it's good to know that we don't have to figure these things out. We just have to pause, go inward, and remember that deep remembering of those ancient teachings that are available there for all of us.
In a way, Marie summarized the thoughts of the teachings that I follow, because we would say that it's only when I know myself as a spiritual being, the eternal being, that I'm connected to the values that are there within the soul. While I think of myself as this physical form, I don't have any contact with my real identity, and so I'm not in touch with my own core values. And the result that we see is what I was describing earlier, the dark age, the iron age. Some of your viewers might know a little bit of what happens in India, but Kali Yuga is the term that they use for this period of time, the dark age. And so when we're just looking at ourselves and seeing others as physical bodies and connecting on that basis, there's so many divisions that separate us from each other. Color, skin, age, gender, many, many things, culture, language, all of this. But when I see myself as that inner being of light, and I'm connected with my own true core values, the purity, the peace, the love, the truth that exists within, I see you in the same way. And so I don't see the color of your glasses or the color of your hair, but I'm seeing here that shining star that you are, the beautiful light that you are. And I know that I'm connecting with you on the basis of that. And so our connection together is then one in which there's mutual respect. And of course, with the awareness of the values that I carry within myself in the core level, I'm able to have dignity. And so in that state of dignity, I'm not asking anything of the other, but whatever it is they say or do, I'm able to hold my own dignity. I'm able to hold my head up high. But also then, if I'm moving on the path towards truth, then those who come into connection and see the beauty of truth and the value of truth will also want to move in that same direction. So it's not being passive and sitting down and say, okay, it doesn't matter, whatever happened, happened. But it's a movement towards truth when I'm connected with my own inner values. But then it also inspires and encourages others to move in the same direction too.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's that notion of being an attraction rather than a promotion, and trying to emulate uh, what our own destination is, what our own hopes are, trying to emulate that in the present moment and in our daily being. Yes.
I know that Indigenous wisdom always speaks of a better world ahead. And I know that many Indigenous people feel that, yes, this is that critical turning point that we're going through, this time of confluence of the negative energy and the positive energy, but it's time to move into that era. And so, yes, let me be the change that I would like to see happen in the world, which is what Mahatma Gandhi said, or maybe his grandson. But that statement, can I be the change that I would like to see out there? And then, yes, maybe we can make that happen.
Yeah. And I'll just say that, Eric, you asked me earlier, or you didn't ask me directly, you asked yourself in an imaginative way, like, how did you do that? How could you listen to all those stories? And the fact is, I've had to reflect a lot on that. And I don't think I articulate this point so precisely in the book itself, because I was trying not to just talk about myself really so much. But what I've realized as I continue to reflect on the experience is that I can think of no other experience in my entire life where I have been so, I would say initially forced, but then realizing that it was the only way to be, so acutely into the present moment. Those hearings, I was fully in the present moment. And I think for the survivors who were speaking, though they were recalling their past, it was a present moment of them sharing what had happened to them and trying to figure out where they would go from there. And for so many, it was setting down things they had been lugging around as spiritual burdens for decades, thinking that everything that happened was their fault. And I know that for me, the gift was bearing witness to that, but being acutely in the present moment, which I think is it's where we have the power to be however it is we're going to be, and to offer ourselves with whatever it is we have to offer, and not be worried about what happened because we can't change that, and not be panicked by what is going to happen because we may not even see that day. We are right here. And how do we be fully present and kind and loving to each other in the present moment? That I can totally control in my way of showing up in the world and being in presence with other people.
It's a deeply spiritual way to look at things because the past is over. It's finished. I can't change it. But also, if I keep reviving the memories of pain and suffering, then that pain and suffering becomes the curtain that blocks me from seeing the opportunity of the present moment. But it also instills fear in me about the future. I wonder how things will turn out. Are there going to be some atrocities further? All of these things. But if I can share from the past my experience and it's recorded, it's fine. But also, can I know that the present moment is my opportunity to create a new destiny, a new future? And so I have to take full benefit and take advantage of this present moment. And if I make sure that I'm doing things according to the natural laws of the universe, the spiritual laws of the universe, then it's going to be fine, because that will then be the foundation of a better world for all of us. And so, yes, very much trying to finish the past, but focused at the present and not worried or anxious or afraid about the future, knowing that I am creating the future today.
I know I can let you have to chat for a long time, and I like it. You're answering many aspects that we were going to discuss, and I know that's the way you work. Maybe just to bring us to the heart of this conversation with those three words, reconciliation, forgiveness, in the context of the time we're now. If you can just both share again and interact with each other for the next 10, 15 minutes. But I think the main concern for us is we talk about truth and reconciliation in Canada for things that happened in the past, but present repercussions. You've been witnessing victims also, Sister Genty, around the world. But today we are facing right in front of our eyes every day. If anyone turns on the news, we are facing the same trauma being imposed upon people as if we haven't learned nothing. The same horrors are being repeated, even more, at a larger scale, in front of the eyes, in front of the world. They used to say, well, I was in public television, we would receive horrible pictures of war, of 9/11, and we would decide as a public media not to show them because of the horror of the pictures, that we felt that was not something you show to a family having dinner. Today, social media is showing us death live. We're seeing the horror. So in that context of today being, the world showing the same darkness or dark age that we wish would be thing of the past, how can you help individuals today? And I know you touched on it already, being in the present, understanding the idea of not allowing repeating the past to come back. But the present is telling me the same horror story. How can you help individuals today, seeing what we're seeing, to even consider reconciliation when you're in the middle of the crisis and right in the heart of the crime, and even forgiveness? So what will be your anchor? What are you holding on to make it possible for us who are crying when we see even a 4-minute video? I had to turn off my camera because, like you, Denti, I was thinking, oh, I have to talk now. I can barely witness 3 minutes of testimony without graphic images. How do we entertain that reconciliation and forgiveness right now?
I can't change the world out there. What I can do is change myself and allow the highest within my own inner being to emerge. But I know also that change within one individual has a ripple effect on the people around us. So I can change my little world. But I also am totally convinced that what we are seeing is the final peak of darkness. And after the darkest hour, then the change happens and there's a transformation and the light begins to come. So I believe that this is the period we're in now, darkest hour. But I also know that when there are people of political will who begin to see the need for spirituality and the need to talk about spirituality in public, what's going to happen is that it's not just a slow one-by-one process, but it's going to reach a point of critical mass. And there will be a large majority that then says there has to be change, and this is the direction of change. And so the little that I know about what's happening in different places now is that people in some countries are saying this horror has to stop. Not everywhere, but in some places. I don't want to mention names, but there are people who are of that ilk. But I think that as we reach that point of critical mass, you'll see a change happen. So I'm totally convinced. It's not even a belief that I have. Just as the day follows the night, I know for sure that the day has to come and it's not too far away.
Do you see it that way, Mary?
Yeah, absolutely. I do actually, because I think we can deplete ourselves by thinking we can fix everything that's out there and to take it all on as weight and burden. And I learned this years ago through my own struggles, not, well before I was involved in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I think anyone who has lived through a hard time on a personal scale or a family scale learns that it's the work that they have to start with. The work that you have to start with is right where you are. It's actually the meaning of my book, North of Nowhere, that we don't, which has a subtitle, which by the way didn't get mentioned, and it's very important to me. The subtitle is Song of a Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner. And it's based on a teaching that I was given that, what is your song? What is your song? Meaning, what is your gift? What is it that you have to offer to the wider world? What is that light, we might say? What is it that you have to contribute? And not as a sum total, but a partial answer to that for me, it became clear, was to offer the beautiful, terrible, inspirational, uplifting experiences of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I had that to offer, and that is the song that I am offering back. But North of Nowhere, as I describe in a story at the beginning about my mother-in-law, actually, it's metaphorical for saying we don't live north of somewhere or south of somewhere or east or west of somewhere. We live right where we are, each of us, in our own place. And that is where we have influence. That is where we have power. That is where there's always work to be done. And it's where we can place ourselves to do it. Even if we travel around, we are still right where we are. It's not about somebody else has to do something. It's not about, oh, look what they're doing over there. It's about what can we do north of nowhere, right where we all are, wherever we are. And I think that, part of the answer is the very fact that we're having this conversation today, and you're asking me, among other things, to talk about a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that ended 10 years ago. How is it that we're still talking about that? And I think that in itself is a hopeful measure. We are still talking about it because people are still struggling with it and still trying to figure out, where do I fit in and what is my place in all of that? And that is a conversation that was not happening 20 years ago. When Chief Robbie, well, he goes by Bobby, Chief Bobby Joseph, when he was still trying to get anybody to listen to him, still trying to get anyone to understand, as my husband says, the enormity of what happened throughout every region of the country. So I think that the last thing I would just say is that very early on in the commission, and I had I still have him, I'm going to be seeing him in a couple of days, a spiritual advisor who said to me right at the beginning, and he used the teaching of humility to make his point. Others may frame it slightly differently. But he said, Marie, this work is going to take a great deal of humility. And by that, I don't mean the lack of ego. He said, I actually mean it in the way of belief that others will continue the work, because you may not see you will very likely not see the kind of changes you hope for in the life of the commission, and you may not see them in your lifetime, but that does not mean that other good people are not picking up and doing what they can and carrying forward in the emergence of that broader light And I think that that one of the things we punish ourselves with is our limited human nature of what is time. And so if we can't see the fix right now, if we see all these things around us right now, and we can't see the solution, and we can't figure out how do we make that happen, it injures us in a way. And what it cannot do, I believe, is incapacitate us to the point where we become immobilized. I think that we have to do our part where we are and how we can, based on our means, our resources, our capacity, and do what we can. But most importantly, do that in the spirit of who we are and the spirit and the light that we want to carry into the world as a contribution to the bigger work that will continue in that circle.
And Mary, if I can, and I will let Genty after also respond to you, but I know your life. I know beside being probably the best friend every one of your friends will say you are, being an amazing mother. I've seen you with your children, one of the most amazing grandmother. Your husband that you also mentioned was in a residential school. He wrote his book, sharing his, trauma and what he went through. You were with him. One of the biggest thing we're talking about in terms of time is sometimes the transfer of trauma from one generation to another. You've been at the heart of what you went through within your own family, seeing all that happening. And now we're talking, and that's what I wanted to take you on, is looking at the future in terms of hope, like we have reconciliation, forgiveness. What is that light in the heart for you that keeps you going and gives you a sense of hope for the future, where you see that forgiveness is possible, reconciliation is possible, and maybe it is happening already now, and maybe it has even happened in your heart already. So how do you see that future on the basis of your personal context as well?
Well, I think that work itself is also not linear. I think it is continuous and it moves around and it slides back and forth. It's a process and it's an ongoing, as it said in our TRC mandate, actually, I think very, very truthfully, it is an ongoing individual and collective process. So I'm not saying, okay, we figured that out and now here we go. I'm saying it is constantly a work in progress, but I think interpersonal dynamics and human relationships are like that, and will always be like that. I think what we have to do is stay awake to ourselves and stay awake to each other. And in the case of our country, not fall back asleep on our own history as a country. And that's the challenge of the world. It's really the question that you've asked is we see all of this, we've seen that it's happened elsewhere. How do we not learn from that? And maybe there is sad truth in the fact that you don't learn till it gets really close to home, and then it makes it real. You don't understand flood somewhere else till it's your backyard flooding. Maybe that's our limitation as a human species. I don't know. But I do know that we still have the ability to step up and support each other and care for each other. And I've seen countless examples of that. And I just live with that hope. I try to control what I can control. I try to be the best of who I can be, and I'm not always that, but I try to renew that every day and to model that. And I do try and have tried and continue to work on transferring to our children and grandchildren, and they know their responsibilities in all of this. That may not be true for all families. I had the blessing, I would have to say, of growing up in a very big extended family. So I had that modeled for me in a way that my husband Stephen did not. He did not have that. He didn't even have, nuclear family. He didn't have a family. He had rules and he had an institution and he had fear. That's a completely different context for growing up and maturing your own sense of self-worth and your own sense of interpersonal beauty, I guess, and thinking that you have anything of beauty to offer because you can barely manage yourself. And I'm not saying I was the counterpoint to that, but I think I think somehow we came together in the most unlikely of ways. We're very different in so many ways, but somehow we were brought together. He often says he thinks it was our grandparents who both had abilities beyond the earthly realm, and he often thinks they are the ones who brought us together. I don't know, but what I do know is relationships are not easy. I think we kid ourselves if we think, well, relationships are easy, so why isn't the world better? I think relationships are challenging. And part of the reason they're challenging is because they deepen our own awareness of ourselves and our ability to see ourselves in all of that and to work on ourselves, as Sister Janti has said, so that we can create that kind of extension of good spirit that reaches other people. And I know that because I know I was supported through the work of the TRC with the prayers and spiritual uplifting of many, many people. And I could feel that. Yeah.
Can I pick up on this word hope? As when there's a fairy story, usually it's the goody who wins. And I know that there's in real life at the present time, that's not always the case. But yet somehow, because the origin of the human spirit is of goodness, I don't believe that we started with a mixture of good and bad. I believe deeply that we started with goodness, just goodness, and then gradually through ignorance, and it wasn't the devil that came in, but it was ignorance that clouded our vision about our own identity. And that's when negativity began, and that's also when sorrow and suffering began. So my hope for the future isn't just a wish, but the certainty that I have, because I believe in the goodness of the human spirit. And so because of that, I know that whatever that's negative that's going on now, the power of goodness is greater than whatever we are seeing today. And that it is goodness that will blossom and flourish, and a world that has really become a jungle of thorns can change into a garden of flowers. And that's an image we often use in our teachings. So they come in all the teachings of spiritual dimensions. But this is what gives me hope. So whatever it is I'm seeing with these two physical eyes is one thing, but the soul inside knows that there's something else beyond that.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's appropriate or timely, but and Eric, you have not alerted people to the fact that I will have to leave at some point, and I may be rude in doing so at the time. So I would like to offer words here. We can continue our conversation in the questions, but all of these things were in my reflections while I was writing the book, and just in the spirit of what Sister Johnny was just saying, I wonder if I might read that last paragraph that I wrote.
Sure. I have to share
in case
that.
I don't get to say a more elegant goodbye when I have to leave. I have to
No. I want to share also that I was privileged. I want to offer the context for you to feel it. When Mary was writing a book, she came to my place at some point and she read me excerpts of her book. And we're on a balcony. So go on my balcony. There are plenty of flowers, beautiful balcony with beautiful light. We're both sitting on a balcony and she started reading. And I went way, way beyond my balcony. So go ahead, Mary, take us to the balcony and share that paragraph.
Well, I'll just say this. My hopes come with promises, and I listed a number of them, but this one I want to zero in on: to the thousands of children who died in or as a result of residential schools, the lost and missing children. I promise to do whatever I can in the continuing push to keep looking for you. I carry you in my heart and will bear witness to your precious and unforgotten lives for the rest of my own. And then there's the promise that I made to myself, which is to keep doing what I can to breathe life into the TRC calls to action and contribute to a justly shared country through the infinite possibilities of ongoing reconciliation. As the saga continues, may we keep our eyes and hearts open to each other. May we learn the lessons of injustice, hardship, and failure and act with determined hope for what is still possible. May we respect the worth of each and every life with its potential to make a difference. And may we hold to belief in the universally sacred teaching of love, which lies at the heart of all possible reconciliation, with its power to transform everything: a life, a relationship, a country, a world.
Mm.
Mhm. Well, that is about reconciliation and forgiveness and love and carrying forward what we can and how we can.
Thank you. I just want to honor also the schedule designed by the wonderful team. And before we also let you, Mary and Sister Genty, move on to your own reality, were there maybe, Nina, there is a question, or you want to, on behalf of the
Okay.
audience, ask something?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Thank you so much. A beautiful, riveting conversation, which I was hoping could go on, because there's just so much richness that came out of that dialogue. There aren't any questions at the moment, but
Which I think is a very good sign. This is a
yes,
perfect sign.
people are listening intently.
No
Um,
question, just in the
yeah,
moment.
no, absolutely. So we have 10 minutes more where you can continue the conversation, and then we'll ask Sister Jayanti to do a short guided meditation before we end at 3:30.
Mhm. Well, I
This
think
part,
that
this segment at 3:30, just this segment.
so I think that extra 10 minutes will be very, very welcome. It's such a big topic, and I think in terms of the time, we've been really addressing the idea of time. I think we've been addressing reconciliation, like you said, Mary, doesn't have to be defined. It has to be understood and experienced. But in terms of forgiveness, if you can just add a little bit tips for us, because, and I know, Sister Genti, you have a sort of very broad experience where forgiveness is not just sometimes with the war or residential school. Sometimes forgiveness is just about a child having to forgive his mother for not being present, or sometimes it's forgiveness from a grandmother to the grandchildren for not having done what they were asked to do. So forgiveness has that. Is forgiveness the final word? Is that where we have to move into? Is that the heart of the process? Maybe Genti first, and
Can I share a little story?
we love stories.
Um, you know Daddy Janki very well. Marie doesn't, and your viewers probably don't.
She would
But
have heard about her a lot.
okay, so I had the good fortune of knowing Daddy for most of my life, right from when I was little, but also sharing a room with her for about 40 years in London. So can you imagine? She'd wake up at 3:45 in the morning and she'd be talking about something spiritual or reading something. And 11 o'clock at night, again, she'd say, do you remember this morning we heard this lesson? So it was quite an amazing mentoring that I had. But at one point I saw, in the days that you still had those clunky phones, and so the telephone rang and she picked it up because she was sitting next to it. And it was a man's voice, and I didn't know what he was saying. But a few of us were in the room with her, small room in Tennyson Road, the first centre that we had. And he was talking very loudly and he was very angry. And all she was saying was, gee, yes, yes, and that's it. And then he hung up, so she put the phone down and she told the sister who was there, your husband's very, very angry because you should have been home at least 2-3 hours ago. He's been waiting for you. And he's really scared that you're not going to come back to him. And the sister understood and she immediately packed her little things and off she went. And it had been a problem between the two, one on the path of spirituality and the other one not. And so it was creating a lot of fear in the person that at some point she was going to leave him, and she was not going to do that. There was too much love there, but that was her fear, his fear. Next day, we had, it was Sunday, and Marie maybe knows, but we have special offerings of food on Sunday that we then share with the whole gathering. And it was just a small class, about 20 people at that time in those days. So Daddy personally went up to the sister who had come in the morning class, and she got some of that morning breakfast packed and said, "Give this to my brother, this lady's husband." And I was surprised, for her to remember him in this way with love and send something for him. And she then explained to me, she said, "I can forgive him, but he probably can't forgive himself for the way in which he spoke to me. And I want to help him, not for forgiveness, but even to forget that it ever happened, so that then he's able to come back and see me again without anything, knowing that I'm not holding anything in my heart against him, but he's also able to let go of it." So it was a very beautiful demonstration of not just forgiveness, but also making sure that the other person would also forget, so that then there could be a harmonious relationship together. To me, it illustrates the fact that, yes, it's possible to forgive and to forget, say, that's finished, it's now a new scene, a new chapter, a new beginning, but also to think about how can I make it easy for the other to also keep the door of love open so that they're able to communicate. And I know this is a very minor little story, but when I saw it demonstrated in front of me, it left an impact. But I'm thinking that on a bigger scale, and it's not something that you can tell people to do. You can't say to somebody, you have to forgive. It's something that has to come from a big, generous, open heart. And yes, when I'm experiencing love from the source, then my heart begins to open up and I'm able to let go of whatever it is I was holding on to. So to give, to be able to let go of that and give that forgiveness. It's a big step, but it's possible. And I know that this is what changed the whole story of South Africa, because one man was able to forgive and say, let's have a new beginning, let's have a new chapter. But the other side, of course, already had been prepared. So there was synchronicity of energies at that moment that changed the story. So yes, forgiveness, but also can I then, having forgiven, truly let go so that then it's not troubling me at this moment. Big, big step, I acknowledge that, but it has to happen so that I can move forward myself. If I don't forgive, I'm going to be held back, and that bitterness and anger in me is going to poison whatever else it is that I do. But beyond the forgiving, there also has to be an end to that chapter by saying enough is enough.
Thank you. Mary, just the last few words before we close with a meditation in a minute or two.
I think it's interesting. I was going to zero in on the South African example as well, because I've had a lot of connection with that country in prior years. But the choices, I think one of the things that's important about forgiveness is that it's a choice, and it's a decision. And of course, it's an intention, and it can be a superficial intention, which in my experience never does the trick. It's pro forma. Or it can be with an intention of healing and repairing of relationship and creating wholeness. Because I think one of the things about the bitterness behind an inability to forgive, the injury behind that, is that it keeps people separated and it keeps them on opposite sides of whatever it is. It keeps them polarized. And I think our ongoing challenge is how do we hold each other close in ways where we can be in communion with each other, in a communal way, so that we are experiencing and supporting the growth and beauty in each other. I know that well before the commission, well, just to complete my thought about South Africa, I mean, Mandela could have said, okay, you know, to be blunt about it, all the Black people are going to be in the government and everybody else is going to be on the other side. And he didn't do that. And nor did he do it with the security services and the police services. He made sure that people were part of things and were having this brand new opportunity to experience what it might be like to work together and benefit from each other and learn from each other. Um, I know from previous lives where I've had to deal with a lot of issues, both within our home and within our wider community, issues related to addictions and dependencies of various sorts. And forgiveness is a notion that comes up a lot there. Of course, forgiveness of oneself is hard because when you're blinded by anger or resentment or injury, it's so easy to look for who's actually to blame for that, and it's somebody else. It's never, yourself. And I remember a wise person saying, at least for me, it came through as wisdom. Forgiveness in part is forgiving back to the other that which belongs to the other, and for setting yourself free from holding on to and nursing and nurturing that injury, which is so often completely tied up and restricted by anger, and by notions of revenge. And if you can set that down, that's what I think the elder was talking about that I quoted in my book, where he's saying it's for bringing your own self back together again. It's your own self-healing by setting down that resentment and that clinging to past harm. But it is also in a new way that I'm thinking about today, with thanks to you, sister. It's not just for giving back to the other. You're the one who created this mess. You carry it. I'm not going to carry it anymore. It's not in that spirit. It's also for giving back to the other the freedom of dignity and being able to be reconnected and brought back in. And I saw evidence of that throughout the TRC when people who had, by their own admission, perpetrated on the next generation the very same things that had happened to them as children, for them to experience community forgiveness, of being welcomed back into the community with an acknowledgement of what had happened to them that had made things turn the way they did. One of the most beautiful kind of scenes that I hold from all that experience with the commission, and really at its heart was forgiveness as reconciliation.
Maybe, Genty, then you can respond and conclude with 2 minutes of words and emotions and feelings in a meditative form that will offer a last bouquet for all of us to contemplate.
Let's have a meditation, and it'll be on this theme. I go deep within and connect with the being that I am, the being of light that shines in the forehead. And as I go inside, I see that the peace that I long for seems to be hidden. What must I do to remove the barriers to peace? I realize that a big, big barrier to my own inner state of peace are the things of the past, or even maybe things that are continuing in the present. I see that is the pain from the past, it's the sorrow that I've carried for a long time. I realize if I want to experience peace, and peace would open the door for love and truth, which also lies within. I need to let go of the sorrow and the pain. Is it possible for me to take so much love from the source, from the divine, that it opens my heart and I can let go of the sorrow? Perhaps those who inflicted the pain and sorrow didn't understand what they were doing. Perhaps they did, but there was a shadow over their conscience. That if I hold on to the sorrow, I hold myself back. I keep myself imprisoned. The power of the love of the divine, I decide to let go of the sorrow and to forgive, so that I can be free and I can move forward in my journey. And go, I let go, I let go. And in this freedom, I am at peace with myself. I am at peace with the perpetrators. I am at peace with my past. The joy of freedom is the gift of letting go and forgiving.
So I just want to say thank you, Sister Jayanti. Thank you for your kind words. And actually, it's the panel that I'm actually also thanking. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for your wisdom, which I have no doubt at all will provide us with a lot of food for thought in the next segment of our interaction on this topic. So thank you very much again for being with us.